covered everything.
Alright guys, we're back in the back-end development certification doing the API and microservice projects. So what we're trying to do is the request header parser microservice. And what's basically happening is from this image here, let me bring, oh, I can't make it full screen. What we want to do is we want to get our IP address, or the client's IP address, the language that the browser is in, as well as some software details. Are they using what Windows operating system? If so, and what browser is what? So for mine, what we want to do is basically just have a call. Gets the IP address. This would be our local host. What language? I put English US, and then I added the operating system plus browser Chrome. So I just formatted it slightly different. I thought it was a little bit cleaner. Now, we're going to do that all in our application. So let's go ahead and jump right in and pull up our Visual Studio Code, which is the IDE I use. To get started, open up a folder or a project. I happen to have header parser YouTube is the name of mine, to separate the YouTube version from the version I did locally. And the first thing that we're going to need to do, we'll start fresh, right, is we want to jump into the terminal, and we want to install npm if you haven't already. So we're going to npm init. For this, we'll name it app. We'll name it header parser. Nothing crazy. Just kind of go. Oh, you can't have any caps. So header parser, and then just hit enter for a while until you get done. And so here we'll have our package.json. We'll see the name is header parser. Now the next thing that we're going to need is they have it at index.js. I typically like to put it as app.js. And so we'll create a new file here called app.js. I think it's just a little more intuitive. Some people call this server.js as well. Don't worry too much about it. But we're going to use four dependencies that we're going to install right now, but we're only going to install the first three till we get to that point later on. The first one that we're going to install is Express, so that's going to be npm install -- save. And let me actually make this full screen real quick. -- save and Express. So that's going to install Express. We're next, which is going to allow us to do things easier, basically. That's really why you use Express. And then we're going to do body parser. This is going to help us output stuff in JSON, and then we're going to also use cores, which will allow us to do things in cross-origin requests. So let's go ahead and do that. And you know what? Because I believe my webcam might be blocking this a little bit, we'll go ahead and turn that off for this video right now. So npm install -- save, and we're going to do the same thing for cores, and then body parser as well. The same sort of three items that we always import, but I always like going through all the steps with everybody so that there's no confusion, especially if you're new, right? You've only done this once or twice like myself. I'm still learning, and I would appreciate someone if giving me a tutorial not to skip any steps. So npm install -- save, and then we're going to do body -- parser. All right, cool. So now that we did that, I'm going to turn the webcam back on so you guys don't miss me too much. And we are going to just basically import our requirements. I'll just copy and paste this over. Same sort of thing that I would normally do. Let's go ahead and close this. All we're basically doing is saying, hey, those libraries that we brought in, make sure that you are... Uh-oh. Did our node modules go in the wrong section? Yes, they did. So where is our node modules? We should have some node modules showing up right here. Interesting, interesting. Let's see if this works. It could just be the IDE bugging out a little bit. We'll go ahead and close this real quick. Before we have our other IDE open as well. Just want to make sure that our node modules are there and functioning properly. Otherwise, we're going to have a bit of a headache as we continue to do this. So instead of header parser, we want header parser YouTube. Let's go ahead and open this up. And okay, cool. So they are there. Our IDE was just, or our text editor rather, was going a little crazy. But better check now than later. And so we have everything that we want to install. And while I'm at it, I need to open up my second one here. File, new window. Pull this up over here. Folder. All right, so we imported our three sort of libraries, basically saying, hey, we're going to use Express, we're going to use Body Parser, and we're going to use Cores. The next thing we're going to do is basically instantiate our app. Just going to throw this comment in here. And then we're going to, that's just going to be var app is equal to module.exports is equal to Express. Basically just creating our Express app. And then we're going to use various, we're going to take our app, our Express app, and we're going to tell it to use some of the libraries. That's basically what's going on here. So .json. And then it's going to be app.use cores. So we're just, this is us importing them to the application. This is us setting it to our app. That's really the gist of it. Now, what do we need to do next? Well, thing I always like to do, especially with working with backend, there's a lot of stuff going on in the background. You always want to make sure that your code is functioning properly. So we add this app.listen with the 3000 for our localhost, and all it is basically saying when we hit this localhost, go ahead and run some stuff. In this case, it's just going to console log working. So what should happen now is when we go and launch our Node application, I'm using NodeMon, which will autosave update, so that's something that you can install as well. But you'll see that we have this working. Now, if you don't have that installed, I highly suggest you do. But if you don't, you can do node dot, and what did we name our header underscore parser? So node header underscore parser. Oops. Couldn't find it, Oh, node app.js. Sorry. There we go. So there, a little bit of brain fart. Let's go ahead and exit that. Again, I really do encourage you to use NodeMon, and that way it will update automatically. So let me launch that back up. And so we have our server running. Now, what we're trying to do is a get call that's going to return some information. Now, I encourage you to start storing APIs and variables. API URL. And so we'll, just because I find it a little bit more intuitive when you start storing everything in a variable instead of passing things in without, even if you're using it one time, because you never know when you're going to use it again. So our var API, what we want to do is create a link that's, the path is API/whoami to get the IP address, the language, and the operating system for the browser. Cool. So we're going to have our path here, which is going to be /API/whoami. And then we're going to do a get call. To do a get call, it's app.get. And then we're going to pass in the URL, location of the URL. And then we're going to pass in a callback function that the first parameter is going to be the request. The second parameter is going to be the response. And then the third parameter is next, which will basically allow us to chain it. We're not going to use that one, but we're going to include it all the same. Now, the first thing that we want to do is make sure that this is working. Always test, man. Always test along the way so you don't have to go back and figure out 100. Whatever. We just want to make sure that it's working. So our server is running properly. What we need to do now is when we click this API/whoami, it's not going to display a message here, but in our console it will actually say 100. So it did not say 100, and because of it, I am sad. So we have to figure out why that is the case. Oh, and I see right here, our cores, we forgot our brackets. Now let me go and try this one more time. I may have to restart the server. And now when we hit send again, it sent the 100. Now this is going to go for a while, so I'm going to go ahead and close it because we didn't actually send a response. So how do we get the data that we want? Now, I highly encourage you to jump into the Express documentation to do this, because this is all sort of Express, and you'll see in a second. But basically, the gist of it is we're going to create 3 variables. One's going to be language. One is going to be software. One is going to be IP address. Now, the simplest one to see the IP address, the way that we do that is just by taking our request, basically the person who's sending us a request, and saying .ip. This will go and give us our IP address. Now, how do we see that? How do we output that in JSON? Our response, that's what the res is, our response.json. And we just output it. So in this case, we're going to output an object. We'll go ahead and do this piece by piece. We have our IP address. IP address. And then we'll pass in our IP address. And so if everything is working, we should get a : 1 for our localhost. Let's go ahead and launch our server one more time. And let's pull up our Postman, and we do a send, and we'll see, cool, so we have our IP address, 1/3 of the way there, basically. Now, the next part is you have to go and get the language. Okay, so going through the Express documentation, you might find there's a couple different ways, because we're in Express 4.x something. So originally when I did this, I had different ways of getting the language, but what we want to do is do rec.accepts languages and pass that in. So okay, let's see what this gives us. So we get pass in language, and then we'll pass in the language value that we just stored. All right, cool. Let's do our response one more to send. Do another send. All right, so that didn't work, and it didn't work because this is a function. So I have a little bit of a error right there. So we'll do another send, and when I do that send, you'll see that we get 2 languages here. We get basically 2 different languages. So we have to decide, do we want to include both of these, or do we want to include one? I only wanted to include this first one right here, en-us. So to do that, it's just an array, right? So we can just go ahead and target the 0 index and save it, jump back in here, make sure everything's working, send it, and there we go. We have our language as well. So last but not least, we have to get the user agent. So this is where I install. We talked about installing a 4th dependency that I normally don't, but because of what we're doing, you'll see right now why. So we're gonna do a rec to get the user agent. And you may not know, like, user agent, what are you talking about? That's basically the user's information, what operating system they're using, what browsers they have and using, and all that sort of stuff. And you can get that information in a couple different ways. You can do it like this with a get call and pass in user-agent. And you can also get the header similar like this. I'll put it in a comment below. I couldn't tell you which one's deprecated or not. I just came across a couple different ways of doing this, and I think it's important to note that. And so we're going to pass in software here, and we'll see how it comes out and why we installed a 4th dependency. Okay, and we go and do a send, and you see here we get our software. We get what system they're on, we get what browser versions they have installed, etc., etc. Now, this isn't what we want, right? We just want this, and we just want our current browser that we're using. Now, how can we fix that? Well, you could definitely write a regular expression and do all this sort of craziness, or you could use someone else's module that they already created and use it, because that's kind of the node slash way of the world now, right? Is someone taking the time to develop something, go ahead and use it. So we're going to use something called express-user agent, which basically is going to send us a JSON back. But before we do that, we have to go ahead and install that. So let's go ahead and close our server, and then we'll do npm dash install, install dash save, and that's going to be express dash user agent. Give it a second here. This is going to install our dependency. So first thing we have to do is install it. Second thing we have to do is require it. And I'll put this little comment here where we use for easy parsing of user agent for response. So that's why we're using it. Go var user agent. So let's require it. It's required. And then pass in the name of the module. It's express dash user agent. And now we just have to kind of instantiate it to our app. So after app.course, we'll do app.use. And in this case, it's user agent.express. And this will allow it to use that, our application will allow it to use that library. Now, let's go ahead and you wouldn't know this other than going through the documentation from the GitHub, but to get that information now for software, instead of getting the Git like we had before, we are now going to use .userAgent, and you'll see that we get a whole bunch of data back. Let's launch our server one more time and bring up this. And so when we do our send, you see we get this whole long string of text, everything that's in the user agent. We really only care about the browser and the operating system. So that's all we really care about. This is legitimately, and you can see this is the source, right? So it has all this sort of stuff. Is it a desktop? True. Is it Windows? True. So you can get all these sort of Boolean values about what item the user is using, but all we really care about is the browser and the operating system. From this point, all we have to do is take our software and concatenate a nice string, a string from it. So we have rec.userAgent. So instead of rec.userAgent, what we want to do is just change this a little bit. We want to pass in an os : space rec.userAgent.os, just because it's the JSON, we can target it like this. And we're just going to format this to however we wanted. You could obviously do whatever you want with it. I'm just giving you one way of doing it. Put a space, a plus, and then it's going to be rec.userAgent.browser. Let's save this. Everything's updated, and if I didn't have a syntax mistake, which that'll be a first, everything should work. And it looks like everything worked just fine. So at the end of it, we have completed our project. Request header parser microservice to get the client's IP address, the language that their browser is in, as well as the software that, the operating system and the browser that the current person is using. So I hope you guys found this helpful in doing this API project. And as always, if you like me and you want to support me, you can at patreon.com/codingtutorials360. And don't forget to join our Facebook group, Code Tech and Caffeine. The link is in the description below, where we kind of try and keep everybody motivated and share what's going on in the coding world, keep everyone on track. That's the point of the group, as well as to share funny memes. So don't forget to join that as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next project. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. If you're interested in coding bootcamp, check out devmountain.com, where housing is included in your price of tuition. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and support me on Patreon. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.